You know who I am, you know what I'm doing, let's get this review over with.
Just to recap my feelings on Suburban Nights, whereas Kick-Assia struck me as a well-thought-out movie, Suburban Nights just feels like a 2-hour sketch. The characters are often poorly used. In fact, the non-reviewers often seem to have more material to work with than the actual reviewers, the guys who we actually watch these movies for. And they're just all around poorly placed. Kick-Assia, to its credit, seemed to know how it was going to use the characters, so most of them had adequate screen time. Now, some expressed confusion at my disaster movie comparison. Well, the directors of that film had ideas for sketches and created the story around those sketches. That's why the plot often either seems tacked on or makes little to no sense. Suburban Nights follows that structure as well, being a compilation of sketches. Kick-Assia followed the Mel Brooks rules of parody in that it has a cohesive narrative and emulates what it is trying to parody. For example, Blazing Saddles is actually a pretty good Western just as much as it is a parody of those Westerns. The difference between Suburban Nights and Disaster Movie is that Suburban Nights did still make me laugh, or at least smile. Maybe only 50% of the jokes worked, but it was enough. Sometimes the jokes were even inspired. But as a fan of guys like The Snob, The Critic, Angry Joe, and even to an extent Mars Girl, watching them goof around is amusing to me. So as a fan, I enjoyed it more than not. But my question is, why? Why did they step back from making an actual movie to instead making a 2-hour-long sketch? The first possibility is that Doug Walker figured the movie would do well in terms of views anyway, and he just decided to let everyone screw around. This would explain the lack of structure and why some people have more screen time than others, because people with, for lack of a better word, louder personalities would probably hog the screen time from the more quieter personalities who would just sit back and have little to do. But honestly, I don't buy that. Like Doug Walker or not, the fact that he consistently releases an episode a week shows that he is professional about what he does. Plus, the movies apparently are very difficult to make, so that would be largely out of character for him. Not to mention the fact that somebody apparently came close to passing out behind the scenes, so they clearly had a pretty tough schedule to do. In fact, I might even argue that his professionalism might have hurt the quality of Walker's reviews, because it ceased being a passion and they became a job. So, what other possibilities are there? I'm not sure, but I'm presuming that the reviewers had more input this time around. I highly doubt Doug would know, for example, that the Snob could do an Indiana Jones impersonation, or that Mars Girl could speak Japanese. Maybe he did, I'm just guessing. So maybe he let them choose who to be. If so, this would have meant that there would be a crapload of last-minute writing to do, which might explain why the jokes were more redundant and lazy this time around. He was simply in a hurry to get it all together in time. It's also possible that the reviewers wrote their own dialogue, but I don't know. Filmbrain's dialogue is more similar to Filmbrain's dialogue from Kick-Assia over Filmbrain's dialogue from his own reviews. So I think Doug probably still wrote it after everyone decided whom to be.
My final conclusion comes from my own experience with screenwriting, and yes, before any of you mention it, I am perfectly aware of the fact that unlike Doug, I have yet to make any of my scripts into movies. Fucker.
I've written a few scripts and noticed that some write themselves. I'm guessing Doug went into writing Kick-Assia knowing most of what he wanted to do, how he wanted to balance the characters, and where he wanted the story to go. He probably figured he could churn out Suburban Nights in a similar amount of time.
Obviously, all scripts need effort, but all the ideas come a lot quicker. You could think of every little subplot, all the character development, everything, and it comes out easily. Other scripts, though, you need to put a lot more time and effort into them because they just don't develop that easily. And I think that's the problem with Suburban Nights. Doug just didn't have the time to flesh everything out.
I suspect he had a handful of jokes, shots, and scenes planned. I'm sure he was planning Swade's return, the cool-looking car explosion, the trailer money shot, the park battle, and maybe the conclusion. But while there are a handful of inspired moments, the rest seems like he was desperately trying to think of material. Hence, why he ultimately resorted to padding, because there wasn't enough time to figure out anything better. I think Kickassia was 90% in Doug's head when he wrote it, so that everything came on paper much easier. I think Suburban Nights was maybe at 25% in his head when he wrote it, but I am just speculating. In the end, if you like That Guy with the Glasses and its reviewers, Suburban Nights is good enough to warrant a look. Just don't have high expectations.
But let's face it, nobody's going to watch this movie other than the That Guy with the Glasses fans. Well, them in the busy street. And now that I think about it, since you've all probably have either seen the movie or at least have made a point not to watch it, this review has been a complete waste of time. Wow. My name is Marshall Horror, and I'm here to tell you that those who cannot do, critique.